and go live. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on a Friday afternoon. Give a few minutes for everyone to log on, but while we are waiting for everyone to get on the webinar, if you could do me a favor and just type in the chat that you can hear me on your audio, that would be much appreciated. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Oh, yay. Okay, thank you, Sam24. Appreciate it. Perfect. Well, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Mary, and I am with Fairygodboss, the largest career community for women. For those of you who aren't familiar, we are the largest career community, and we offer a variety of free resources like webinars like the one we're doing today, other virtual events, company reviews, the ability to create profiles and connect and engage with one another on the Fairygodboss site. And we are so excited to be joined with Vargas of the Latinista today to talk to us about Hispanic Heritage Month. We will have time at the end for Q&A, so you can use the chat or the Q&A function on your screen. We'll also be emailing out a recording of the webinar so you can revisit it at any time, and it'll also live on the Fairygodboss site under our past events. And so without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Yai, our guest, to introduce herself and dive into her presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mary, and thank you, Fairygodboss, for inviting me. I'm not sure if any of you have read my bio, but I'll take a few moments to talk a little bit about my career trajectory and what kind of work I do. Later on in my slides, I'll tell you a little bit about me, but more on the personal side and why I do the work that I do. And so I actually grew up here in New York City, but I was born in the Dominican Republic. I've been here for quite some time, and I studied advertising and marketing communications. I went to school at the Fashion Institute of Technology, as well as NYU. You know, when I was growing up and my career counselor asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up, or in a professional sense, I thought to myself, I'm not really sure how I'm going to differentiate myself from everyone else here in this class. He actually said, congratulations, now you got the same degree as everyone else in this class. How are you going to get a role against everyone else that's vying for that same role? And I thought, what could be my unique sort of value proposition? What's so great about me that makes me different from everyone else here that's learned literally the same exact information in advertising and marketing? And so the more and more that I thought, I came to realize that being able to speak Spanish was one of my attributes that I could use to be able to gain knowledge. And not just that, it's actually the ways in which I've used to capture the sort of attention of all of the employers that I've had over the last 15 years. So I spent about 15 years in corporate America, and more particularly in roles having to do with multicultural marketing, diversity and inclusion strategy. And more particularly, I spent about 9 years recently at New York Life Insurance, a financial services company, developing and delivering a lot of this marketing and diversity strategy to their recruiting as well as the sales teams. And so my superpower is the fact that I can take my experiences as a Latina, as an immigrant, as growing up here in New York City in a very diverse culture, and being able to use that experience and knowledge to be able to say to these employers, hey, I've got a superpower, and it's speaking Spanish, as well as I can share with you how my community buys products, how they think, how they interact with services, and how to better discuss those things among our dining room table. And so about 7.5 years ago, and you'll see this in my slides later, I decided to develop a community, much like this one here at Fairygodboss, but in particular one for Latinas and women of color. So that community is called the Latinista. I decided to create this community because I saw that all of the conferences, events, and professional development workshops that I was attending, nobody looked like me. there weren't any Latinas and hardly any women of color there attending to be able to better themselves as employees. And so I thought to myself, man, I'm so blessed to be able to get a lot of the training that I'm getting in corporate America. How can I give access to my friends and community and all of the women that are surrounding me? And so I thought, well, how about I start developing some casual conversations? So I started on meetup.com. I built that community, and little by little, 5 women turned into 10 women. And now we're in 4 chapters across the US, New York, Chicago, Miami, and LA. And every single month, similar to Fairygodboss, we get together and we learn something new. So it's really elevating our skills, really understanding that if we don't have the time or the energy or the money to go back to school or to get a certification, we can attend these 2-hour workshops, either online or in person, to be able to keep learning as a professional, as an individual, and as someone who's giving back to the community, and to also stay on top of technology. I'll tell you a little bit about one of my passions, which is LinkedIn. It's the way in which I've been able to develop my professional brand online. And so throughout those years, I've absolutely loved being an agent of change, as well as sort of a vessel of information and knowledge to those women who perhaps don't have those opportunities at their work site. And so now I've partnered with Fairygodboss, and we do these webinars, as well as we've built a community online on the new Fairygodboss community, which I hope you're all part of. You'll be able to find the Latinista on there. And so today I want to talk about something that we've been recognizing for the past month, but really we recognize it every single day. At least I do, because it's actually the line of work that I'm still in. Hispanic Heritage Month, and it's recently also evolved to some as Latinx Heritage Month. And I'll talk to you a little bit about the evolution of that vocabulary and why we use it. But I've been recognizing this day, not only personally forever, but professionally because of the work that I've done for these major corporations. It's an opportunity to focus our 30 days in saying, we're going to see how many of our employees can really raise their hands and be engaged, and have them help us understand how we can be more receptive and creative and innovative as we're developing products and services for the Latino, Hispanic, or Latinx community. And so now I am actually a consultant, so I'm an entrepreneur. Over the last year and a half, I've been able to build my business in really developing and delivering corporate workshops for organizations like media, entertainment, nonprofit, as well as city government. And so my job is really to go in and to help train the diverse employees. And it's really not done in a silo. So for example, I'll go in and I'll do a workshop on executive presence, and it'll be for the Latino Employee Resource Group. But really everyone is invited, because the last thing that we want to do is keep separating each other. And so it should really be a community. And when we're focusing on professional development, we want to make sure that it's accessible to everyone. And it's not done in Spanish or Portuguese. And so why not have everyone that's interested in investing in themselves join? So that's a little bit of what I do. I'll tell you a little bit more right into these slides. And so I'm going to share my screen now, and we'll go through these slides. Here we go. So here we are. We are at Hispanic Heritage Month. For those of you who don't know, and thank you so much for joining, we recognize Hispanic Heritage Month between September 15th and October 15th. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the contributions of the past, present, and future. But before I get started, I'll tell you just a little bit more. So as I mentioned, I'm a career and diversity strategist. I help organizations as well as individuals understand how they can tap into their strengths. And so I develop and then deliver corporate training. I'm also a multicultural SME. And so for those of you who don't know what SME stands for, it's subject matter expert. Everything that I do is surrounded by diversity, equity, and inclusion, and more particularly to cultural audiences, Latinos, African Americans, LGBT, veterans, millennials, you name it, a little bit of everything. I'm also a community builder through the Latinista. So as I mentioned, I have 4 chapters across the US, and every single month we get together and we do hands-on training to learn something new. So it's skill-based. Bring your computer for about 2 hours, we get down and we learn how to build your LinkedIn profile, how to be a confident public speaker, or how to invest in the stock market. I'm also a mentor for the New York City Mayor, Bill de Blasio. I help about 8,000 women when it comes to their social media, their marketing strategy, and how they can conceptualize their business online on LinkedIn. Speaking of LinkedIn, I am known as the LinkedIn Ninja. I've actually been training on LinkedIn for the last 10 years. And so my passion and my purpose is really to help individuals understand how they can translate their authentic personality and their skills and their traits online so that recruiters and headhunters or people they just want to network with can easily find them so that they can elevate their career. I also am super passionate about helping individuals find their next best career opportunity. So if you're looking for a role, make sure you stay connected with Fairygodboss and the Latinista within our community that we just built. And I'm going to start posting some open opportunities across the country every Monday. And here it is. If you're searching for the Latinista on our Fairygodboss platform, this is how it's spelled. And so for today's agenda, we're going to touch upon my superpowers. And I also want to share with you, as you're going through this presentation, what are your superpowers? What are you so great at that someone has in the past said, wow, Mary, you're an incredible public speaker, or wow, you really are so good at numbers and Excel sheets and VLOOKUPs, or hey, you've got a great knack for building businesses. Have you ever thought of doing this full time? Well, those are called superpowers. And it could be everything from running, from cooking, to just being a great speaker or listener. We're also going to touch upon, of course, Latino contributions of the past, present, and future. We're going to touch upon the evolution of the vocabulary. So I mentioned quickly before how we once started as Hispanic, then we were known as Latino or Latina, and now to some it's Latinx, and I'll tell you why. And of course, I'll mention again to join our community on Fairygodboss. But I want to start on my picture, right? So this is me. I immigrated from the Dominican Republic a very long time ago, about 33 years ago. I landed in Washington Heights. And for those of you who aren't from the New York City area, Washington Heights is pretty much a mini Dominican Republic, full of food, culture, dancing, and just absolutely wonderful and warm people. I've been here for quite some time, and I still go back to the Dominican Republic quite often, as a matter of fact, every single year. And so, as I mentioned to you before, I went to school for advertising and marketing. I went to school at the Fashion Institute of Technology. And when I was there, my career counselor asked me, Jai, what is one brand that you're absolutely passionate about? Where would you love to work? Do you want to work at Donna Karan or Tommy Hilfiger or Carolina Herrera or Gucci, right? What are some of these brands that you're absolutely passionate about? And at the time I said, well, I'm actually at a fashion school, but I'm studying marketing. So I'm not really interested in being in fashion. And he said, so what are you passionate about? What's your favorite brand? I always tell the story of my dad. My dad always used to bring me to the New York Auto Show. I was absolutely obsessed with cars. And so every single March and April, my dad and I would go to the car show. So I loved cars. I used to actually test my memory as we were taking drives across the US. And I say, oh my goodness, Jeep Wrangler, Nissan Altima, Volkswagen Jetta, Mercedes-Benz. And so that was really my passion. You know, it was funny because then my career counselor was like, so let me get this right. You're at a fashion school studying marketing and you want to be a mechanic? And I was like, well, no, not necessarily, but hey, what's wrong with being a mechanic? Well, I then went to find out that Mercedes-Benz, my favorite brand, was actually about 20 miles away from where I lived in New Jersey. And so that's me. I got an internship at Mercedes-Benz. I spent about 3 years there, and I couldn't have been more happy in my entire life. I actually vowed to always seek that feeling that I had when I was jumping out of bed every morning to go to this job. And so moving on, I went to roles at the US Open. I was there for a number of years where I met a really great girlfriend of mine. And then I would move to a public relations agency. I then found a semi-permanent home at a financial services company in which I've spent about 9 years of my 15-year corporate career. And the type of work that I was doing there was helping the company understand how Latinos, both Spanish and Portuguese speaking, were investing in financial products, how they were thinking about generational growth, and what kind of tone and vocabulary and images appealed to them when an insurance agent sat across the table from them. So that was the kind of work that I was managing. I absolutely loved it. And so from there, I started to actually build my organizational relationships. One of the organizations that I built a really strong foundation with is the Financial Women's Association. I actually run their millennials group. I also reached out to the Financial Gym, which is actually the organization that helped me become a corporate employee transitioning into entrepreneurship, now running my own business. This organization really helped me set up my finances, my budget, my goals, and really be very clear about the services that I was driving now as an entrepreneur, helping the Latino community with my services. I then was reached out to an organization called Elvest. It was actually started by Sally Krawcheck. She is an incredible woman on Wall Street. She used to be the CEO of Bank of America, Merrill Lynch. She has built an empire with Elvest. And her and I have worked in a number of workshops when it comes to teaching women the importance of investing in the stock market. And then comes the Latinista, which I mentioned to you before. So over the past 7.5 years, we've probably hosted a number of, let's say maybe about 250 events across the company, everything from very hands-on, very actionable, anywhere from 1-hour workshops to 8 and 9-hour all-day workshops. And I am so passionate about helping women really understand what's at the core of what they're seeking and be very honest, similar to the work that Fairygodboss does, being very honest with ourselves and saying, okay, I've done this much to get this far in my career. What is my next step when it comes to the role that I have? And what do I have to do in between to attain that role? Is it a new certification? Is it learning about new technology? Is it understanding that I may have to go back to work? Or is it as simple as being a better, confident public speaker in front of one person or 500 people? And so I'm absolutely passionate about that. Something that also comes up quite often is women's equal pay. And so since today we're talking about Hispanic Heritage Month, I wanted to share with you one very important day that's coming up, and that's November 20th. That is next month. It's called Latina Equal Pay Day. And I've worked for a number of years on a commemoration project with Lean In. I've spoken on many platforms, both in media, online, and on TV. And I've worked with the Lean In chapters across the country in Chicago, in Miami, and in LA. Lean In is actually run by none other than Sheryl Sandberg, who is the COO of Facebook. And so this is something that she's extremely passionate about, is making sure that women have equal pay. And so November 20th is a very, very, very significant date for activation after Hispanic Heritage Month. And so when it comes to Hispanic Heritage Month, we focus on the history, the legacy, the vocabulary, the community, as well as the data behind this significant date. We want to make sure that we understand and we remember the achievements and contributions of Latinos in today's society. We want to understand how this is leaving a legacy and an impact to those within our community. And I also want to share the evolution of vocabulary, why it has changed and what it all means, because yes, it is kind of confusing, even to me, because I do this all day long. And then the impact to our community and how you can help, as well as some data points that you should know about in case you ever get the opportunity to share your thoughts about what's happening in this community. And so we're going to start from the beginning. The term Hispanic. So back in the 1970s, NCLR, also known as the National Council of La Raza, they helped lobby the census to change the way these groups were classified. So specifically Puerto Ricans and Mexicans, we actually used to be classified as white in the census. And so the National Council of La Raza stood up for our people and they said, no, we shouldn't be counted as white. We deserve our own category because we have very unique experiences and we experience the world in a much different way, as well as products and services. And so the 1980s came along. And so the census created its first report on Hispanics in America. And with that report, Univision, also known as Univision, used these income figures to show advertisers and media companies the Hispanic buying power. So Univision said, now that we know the demographic breakdown of Puerto Ricans and Mexicans and Hispanics in the US, can we use this information to help large media and entertainment companies better understand how to deliver products and services to this community? And that's exactly what they did. And so the individual responsible for coming up with the Hispanic term was actually from Richard Nixon's term. Her name was Grace Flores Hughes. She's the government official that came up with the term Hispanic. And two people that I always like to speak about are, of course, Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. They were part of the United Farm Workers Association. Dolores Huerta is actually very much alive today in the front lines, picketing still about our responsibilities and our collective game-changing opportunities. And so they actually were responsible for the farm workers' benefits and getting them insurance capabilities. Another person that I look up to extremely is none other than Sonia Sotomayor, who's the Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, our highest court. And so you have to respect the work that Cesar Chavez did in the past, and then of course the work that Dolores Huerta still is doing, and then the work that Sonia Sotomayor is doing to be able to protect the laws and the policies that are being brought down currently till this day, especially in the political climate that we're in right now. And so let's start and focus on Hispanic. For those of you who don't know, Hispanic includes anyone whose country has been colonized by Spain, right? So it's Spanish-speaking parts of Latin and South America, such as Cuba and Argentina. This term emphasizes Spanish heritage, something that actually a lot of people are shying away from because it reminds us of the violent ways that we were actually colonized when we were part of the first settlement of these countries. And then we moved on to recognize this community as Latino or Latina. So this is somewhat the present. When it comes to the term Latino or Latina, It includes anyone from a Spanish or and Portuguese-speaking countries of Latin America. So this does not include those from Spain or Portugal, but it does include Brazil because they speak Portuguese. And Hispanic includes Spaniards. So the easiest way to remember this is Latino or Latina includes those from Brazil that speak Portuguese. And Hispanics includes Spaniards from Europe. And now we're fast flashing forward to today's terminology, Latinx. Latinx is a term that we use to be more inclusive in society. You'll see this anywhere. You'll probably hear it as Latinx or Latinx. And so we use this term because it's non-binary. And what does that mean? So when we use the term Latino, it serves as a masculine term. And when we use the term Latina, it serves as a feminine term. But when we use the term Latinx, it's actually non-binary. So we're not really talking to anyone who's masculine or feminine. We're just all inclusive. It's very much open to anyone who sees themselves as Hispanic or Latino or Latina. And something that we sometimes forget to recognize is the fact that race versus culture. For those of you who don't know, there is a term called Afro-Latino or Afro-Latina or Afro-Latinx. And the conversations around Latinidad, which is the culture, are pretty complex. Afro-Latinidad is an example of Latinx who are also of Black origin. And don't get it twisted, racism and colorism are absolutely present within the Latinx community. Even my own family is very fair, blonde hair, blue eyes to one of my uncles, which is very much Afro-Latino, very, very, very dark skin. But there is a lot of racism still within these communities. And so Afro-Latinidad identity is really open for those who embrace both their race and their Latinidad culture. And so diving a little bit into the data and the numbers of this community, just so that you know the power of this community, there are approximately around 60 million, or about 18% of the United States population. And of that 60 million Hispanics or Latinx or Latinos in the US, 63% of that population are Mexican. And the average age for a Latino in the United States is 29. That's 9 years younger than the average overall US population. But even with all of those very impressive demographics, we only hold 2% of the country's wealth. So as you can see, we have a lot of work to do when it comes to financial stability. And so even more so on that point, the per capita income for the overall population was about $26,000 for non-Hispanic whites. But when it comes to other communities, specifically for Hispanics, it's only $15,000 when it comes to the per capita income. And when it comes to liquid retirement savings, we only have $12,000 in liquid retirement savings compared for whites, which is actually $130,000. That is a huge discrepancy. So as you can see, a lot of the work that I do with the Latinista focuses around financial wellness and stability, and recognizing that we've got so much work to do when it comes to generational wealth. And then when it comes to corporate America, there's a lack of representation, of course, across the board in diversity in general, but when it comes to Hispanic, there are only 3% of seats taken up when it comes to board chair rooms in the Fortune 500. 70%, or nearly 350 companies out of the Fortune 500 did not have a Hispanic on their board at all. And only 2%, or about 10 companies in the Fortune 500 CEOs are of Hispanic heritage. So think of 500 companies in the Fortune 500, only 10 people on those CEOs are actually Hispanic. And so there's a huge discrepancy. Think about it. 60 million Hispanics in the US, but we only have 10 Fortune 500 CEOs. And so here are some things that I wanted to share with you that you can actually do immediately to take change for this community. I want you to ask yourself, what causes resonate with me? Is it politics? Is it immigration? Is it generational wealth building? Is it building communities of color? Is it representation on corporate boards? Is it pay inequality? Is it starting new businesses? And then ask yourself, what groups can I affiliate myself with to get more insight, tools, and resources? And once you have those tools, insights, and resources, I want you to share your experience, whether you're a corporation or you're running your own nonprofit or your own business. I want you to share those connections that you have. And most importantly, something that I do quite often is share the challenges that you're having among your communities or your corporation or your business with allies. And the reason why I mention this is that, yes, it's important to share among your core group of other Latinos who are going through the same thing, but what's really going to move the needle of us changing what's happening in society is for you to be able to share the challenges you're having or the challenges that you hear about with allies in the African American or the LGBT communities so that they know how to help us. I want you to also post about Latinx communities that are doing amazing work. Share their successes. I don't know if you followed me on LinkedIn yet, but one of the most recent posts that I did was about the world's best chef. She's actually a Mexican young woman who's 28 years old, and she's a top chef in the whole world. And she's right here in New York City at Cosme Restaurant. So I really love to share, number one, women's empowerment, but number two, what Latinos are doing for our community. And then if you work in a corporation, it's most important that you ask your employer, hey, do we have an ERG? And if you've never heard of an ERG before, it's an employee resource group. It's an affinity group. So say you work at Pineapple Company X. ERGs are formed within this company, whether it's LGBT, veterans, women's community, millennials, and African American groups. And they're really formed to help each other internally mobilize and help each other through challenges that we may be facing within this corporation or outside in our community. And so I want you to ask your employer, hey, is there an ERG here that I can belong to? And if there is, how you can get involved and what kind of leadership position you are going to take. And not only that, I don't just want you to belong to the Latino or the Latinx or the women's group. I want you to start belonging to the other groups. So for example, the LGBT group, the veterans group, the African American group, so that you can learn and share the Latinx experiences and vice versa. You want to be able to share with them why you're having these challenges. And you want to hear from them what they're going through so that you can help each other. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to join a group of just Latinos going through the same thing. What's the good of that in being a silo? And so allyship is so important to the work that you're doing. Also, whenever you see a career opportunity, I want you to share it with your network. Your network, just like yourself, is probably full of diverse professionals, right? And so what I want you to do, or start getting into the habit of doing, is grabbing a new career opportunity, let's say from your job or from a friend at an HR company X, and post it every single Monday on your LinkedIn profile, because you don't know how many of your friends or your network or your extended network is looking for work. And this is actually something that I'm very passionate about. is making sure that the companies and organizations that say they're looking for more diverse talent actually get help from us that are diverse talent. And so if you see a job link out there, say, oh, social media manager at Pineapple Company X, I'm actually going to publish this from my network to see, and maybe my friend, my brother, my niece, or nephew is interested. Don't you want to have more people that look like you working next to you at the company you're at? Absolutely. But it really starts with you. And so take it as your responsibility to be able to help that company that says they can't find those diverse professionals. I love doing that. And of course, what I want you to do is to share that journey with me. Share how you're actively moving the conversation into action, right? Because it's one thing to learn about this experience and the tools and the data and the resources that we've been exposed to, but it's another thing to actually take action. Showing up, making sure that you raise your hand and you say, I'd love to be part of that employee resource group, and I'm going to make sure that all of the communications are consistent across all of our social media platform so that people in the community know how much work we're doing to be a more diverse and inclusive company. And this is how we're going to get more Latinos or more diverse audiences to work here alongside me. And so I want to put up my contact information, and I'm going to invite my friend Mary from Fairygodboss to join us again so that she can open up the chat box and we can take some time to talk a little bit about you and maybe some challenges that you've been experiencing, or help us understand how us here at the Fairygodboss can be very constructive to the kind of work that you're doing. Or if you have any questions specifically around Latinx, Hispanic, or the Latino experience. I am an open book, so feel free to ask me anything.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was so informative, and I love closing on allyship because it's so important that we all support each other and be each other's Fairygodbosses. No pun intended. So you have the chat if you'd like to ask a question there, or you can use your Q&A function. You do have the option of sharing anonymously as well. And then, as Yai mentioned, she does have a community as part of our new Fairygodboss groups. So we will share that with y'all in the follow-up email as well. So you can join and connect with her there as well on LinkedIn and all of the places. So we have one question coming in, and someone would like to find out more about your LA meetup.
Oh, yes, absolutely. We actually just had an event last night in LA. It was a financial literacy event. All of our events take place in Hollywood, California, at a secret location at one of our corporate sponsors. But it's an incredible community. And like I said, a lot of the work that we do is financial wellness. But if you're actually passionate about something that you'd like to share with the community, perhaps you're extremely passionate about Women's Equal Pay Day and political rights, we'd love to have you share your experiences or even run a workshop for us. These talks, which we call charlas, are really about an hour and a half in length after work. So they start at 5:30, 6 o'clock, and we go on till about 8 o'clock. And it's an extremely active community. They do something about every single week. Informally and then very formally every single month. So you can find us on Facebook groups, The Latinista, or on Instagram under The Latinista, as well as on LinkedIn, everywhere really.
Great. So we will wait for a few more questions to come in. And I have a question too, Yai. When deciding to use certain vocabulary, you talked about Hispanic, Latinx, Latino, Latina. How can you decide which language is best to use for any situation?
That's a good question. It's interesting because Hispanic is typically used for more traditional, seasoned people, older people that have been around the way for quite some time. They like using the term Hispanic. For the most part, if you're a millennial or speaking to a millennial audience, you'll use Latinx. But some people really like to gravitate towards something that we've been using for probably the last 10 years, Latino or Latina. But it's challenging. So for example, if you were communicating with me, you'd use Jai is a Latina because I'm a female and you're speaking at me. If you were sending me a communication, but it also includes a man in that communication or someone who likes to go by the terms they or them, then you would use Latinx because they don't want you to refer to them as either male or female. So it's more inclusive. But if you look at me and I identify as a female, you can certainly use Latina. So yeah, it's a little complicated.
That's super helpful. I know everyone wants to use the best inclusive language and be supportive. So thank you for clarifying that. Okay, and one more question. What is your biggest tip for someone who wants to be an ally to the Latinx community?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question. So for example, if you work in a corporation, certainly join that employee resource group, or perhaps if you're in the community, try to reach out to some organizations that are doing work around this group. I've spoken at 16 Hispanic Heritage Month events just in this month. So wow. There's really something going on almost every single day. It makes your head spin. And then more importantly, stay on top of the organizations that really help when it comes to policy change. Like the one that I mentioned, National Council of La Raza. They recently underwent a name change. They're actually Unidos Us, UNIDOS, and then us. They are really the ones that are at the forefront of making sure that they're involved with everything on a political, societal, and game-changing policy movement for Latinos in the US. But if you want to be an ally, simply just reach out to someone who's Hispanic or Latinx and say, you know, what are your experiences growing up here in the US or immigrating to the US? And what are some of the things that I can help you when it comes to your professional development? Maybe they feel like they're not heard, or perhaps they feel like they have to work so much harder than everyone else because of their language barrier, or just to prove themselves because they weren't born here. And so it is a difficult conversation. I wasn't born here, but I did come when I was only 3 years old. So I'm very much actually Dominican American. And so that's how I identify, but I'm also Latina and Latinx. So a little bit of everything. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful advice. And we did research earlier this year specifically about engaging male allies. And the biggest thing that the men we surveyed said is that women can tell them how they can help. And so I think for anyone who wants to be a good ally, a good colleague, it's always asking how I can help. So I love that advice and tip. So that looks like that's all our questions. So thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time in this really informative and educational program. As I mentioned, we will be sending out the recording to everyone via email. You'll be able to find it on the Fairygodboss events page later on. And then we will also send you details on how you can stay connected with the Latinista. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful Friday and a good weekend.
Bye.
Bye.